welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you. I've got a little project for you to do, a little activity for a rainy day. All right, when there's not much to do, you're kind of locked in the house and you're like, I really don't want to do another puzzle. and I've read every book in the house. What can I do, Dave? What can I do? How about this little activity, okay, to help you with your podcast? What if, okay, here's my little game for you to think about. I would love for you to take some time and come up with 3 words that you would use to describe your podcast. Just 3. That's it. Do you think you could do that? Do you think you could come up with 3 words to describe your show? That's a tough ask, right? Because we're wordy people. We're podcasters. We love to talk. But if you really were forced to do so, could you do it? I got a plan for you to kind of map out how to do it, and I'd love to hear your responses at howtopodcast.ca through the SpeakPipe link so I can hear your lovely voices, because you're a podcaster and I want to hear your voice. And you can hit the SpeakPipe link and give me your 3 words for your podcast. I'd love to hear it. And I'd love to share your 3 words and your podcast with the world. So head over to howtopodcast.ca, leave me a message, tell me your name, the name of your show, and the 3 words you would use to describe your podcast over at howtopodcast.ca. Now, how do we get to those 3 words? I have a plan for you. It's all in the show notes. It's all in the episode notes. You can follow along and use that as a guide. But I'm really curious. Can you come up with 3 words to describe your podcast? I think you can do that. And I'm challenging you to try. So if you've ever gone out to a distillery or you've distilled water, you know the kind of the process, right? Steam, and then all the impurities are taken out and you come out with a distilled end product, which is distilling. And that's what we're going to do is we're going to distill the essence of our podcast. We're going to take out all the stuff and get right down to the basics of what our podcast is. And to take this as an objective and take our podcast and make it into just 3 simple words. Okay, this will be helpful. Why? Because when you're talking to people about your show, they're like, hey, what's your show about? Imagine if you could answer with just 3 words. It's an interesting test. I'm working through this myself, so I would love to hear what your answer is, and I'm going to share with you what I'm thinking of for the How to Podcast series. So here we go. So there's some steps that I want to go through, and then kind of some benefits of the activity as well. Okay, we're going to go through. So I got 6 steps for you in how to come down to 3 words to describe your show. First step is simply to reflect on your show. In this reflection step, there's 2 things I want you to consider. I want you to spend some time just reflecting on your podcast mission, vision, and the core values of your show. Like, that's like the skeleton, right? Reach behind you and touch your spine, the back of your neck. Yeah, see, that's a skeleton. That's what keeps everything together. And without that, we'd be all like pudding cups for, I guess, because we'd have no structure, no bone structure, right? Your podcast has a skeleton, and that is your mission, vision, and the value of your show. You're like, Dave, I have a comedy podcast. I have a podcast where I review movies. Great. You still have a structure for your show, and I'd love for you to map those out. So what's your podcast mission? What's your podcast vision? And what's your core values as a podcaster for your show? The second part of reflection is around considering what makes your podcast unique and what you want listeners to take away from each episode that they listen to. So spend some time reflecting on your podcast, which is going to lead you into your 3-word project goal for your show. But first, it starts with reflection. What's my show about? Who's it for? And what do I want my listeners to take away from every episode? Start reflecting on your podcast on this rainy day when you're trapped in the house. It's a great exercise. Okay? Get a piece of paper and a pen. Start making some notes. Reflect on your podcast. The next thing is to do some brainstorming. In the brainstorming piece of our objective here, in these steps that we're doing, We're going to write down all of the words that come to mind when you think about your podcast. And don't limit yourself. Try to go to around 20 to 30 words total, okay? But just let it flow. Don't sit there and overanalyze each word. Just whatever comes to your mind when you think of your show, just bing, 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 just keep writing them down, 20 to 30 words, okay? Just write them out. Just go. And just keep writing, okay? And then what I'd love for you to do is take those words and kind of put them into themes or clusters or file folders, labeling them and kind of putting them in groups. Like I love like M&Ms or Skittles and the different colors, right? So when I was a kid, I'd get all of the colors together. All the red ones go over here, all the blue ones go over here, and the green ones go there. Yeah, yellows here. Yeah, I would get them all organized. I don't know. It's what I did. And I'm thinking this is what I want you to do with these 20 to 30 words, is put them into groups as they relate to each other. And that'll help you to kind of go through the brainstorming piece. So we've reflected on our podcast. We've brainstormed, come up with 20 to 30 words that describe our podcast. Those categories that we put our things into could be entertainment, education, inspiration. They're themes and clusters that we're going to put our 20 to 30 words into, okay? After brainstorming, we get into prioritization. We want to set the priorities for these words and these distilling of our podcast into 3 simple words. So in the prioritization part of this, we're going to narrow down our list by selecting the most impactful and representative words from each of the groups, each of the themes that we have in front of us. And then we're going to aim to have a short list of about 5 to 10 words total. So we've gone from 20 to 30 words down to 5 to 10 words in this step by giving priority to the ones that we think are the most important. Okay? They're all important. But the main focus, what is our priority for our show? Taking those 20 to 30 words down to 5 to 10 words. And then we're ready for the next step, which is selection. When we get to the selection piece, this is where we actually get to choose the 3 words that really best encapsulate the essence of our podcast. These words should resonate deeply and really align with your podcast goal and your audience, both. So this is where we're getting down to those 3 words. We've gone from 20 to 30 to 5 to 10 down to 3. This is where you select those 3 words. The next step after we've selected 3 words is we want to validate that these are the right ones. Where we get to the validation stage, this is where we get to share these 3 words with a few trusted friends, listeners, colleagues to get feedback. This would be a great little end of the episode content piece that you could put in front of your audience and say, hey, I've been listening to this How to Podcast series with this crazy guy, Dave, up in Canada, and he asked me to summarize my podcast in 3 words. I've gone from 30 words to 10 to 3. And here are the 3 words that I think best represent my podcast. But I want to know from you as a listener what you think. Head over to my website, blah.com, and use my SpeakPipe link, because you have a SpeakPipe link, right? Yeah. Use my SpeakPipe link and let me know. Do these 3 words resonate with you? Am I on the right path? When you think of my show, do you think of these 3 words? And ask your audience. It's a great engagement piece. And I want you to know that that's what I do here, is the exact same thing, to use engagement to help shape content and to bring my audience into the conversation. I want you to model that on your show. So choose those 3 words that best encapsulate the essence of your show, validate them by putting it out into your community and asking them for their feedback. And then ensure that these words accurately reflect the perception and the experience of your audience. That's the feedback you're going to get from your audience. Does this actually align with what you're hearing on my show? So we've gone through the steps of reflection. Then we started brainstorming. We got to 20 to 30 words. Then we prioritized the words, getting them down to 5 to 10 words. We got to the selection stage and we got them down to 3. We've asked for validation of our audience, and now it's time to apply them in the application stage. It's time to make these 3 words work for us now. Now that we're down to the 3 words that we feel best describe our show, it's time for us to take these 3 words and use them as our guiding principle for our content creation, for how we show up to our audience, for how we market and talk about our show, for how we determine who's the best guest for our podcast, and how we brand ourselves, how we show up in the world. We're going to use these 3 words as our guiding light, our stars in the sky that lead us through the darkness to our destination. There are North Stars, plural. We're going to definitely have to come back to these 3 words, though, because I think in time, there might be a re-navigation and a retooling of these 3 words. Going through this process again, once a year, twice a year, once every 2 years. You pick the time frame, but maybe it's a good practice for us to come back and redefine, are we still focused on these 3 words, or have we pivoted a little bit? Have we changed? Use these 3 words as your guiding principle for all the things you do in your podcast. And then regularly revisit these words to ensure that your podcast stays aligned with these core things that you've determined through this process. So what about an example, Dave? This is all kind of like pie in the sky, lots of thinking I'm having to do here, but I need an example of how this all fits together. So imagine, as an example, you have a podcast around personal growth and self-improvement. After going through these 6 steps that we've already talked about, you've chosen inspire, transform, and empower. That's a great way to kind of look at your show. And as you do every episode, you're going to go through the lens of, is this episode going to inspire someone? Is it going to transform someone? Or is it going to empower someone? Or is it going to do them all? Or a combination of the 3? And if it doesn't hit those things, then maybe you don't do that episode. When you look at your guest, a potential guest coming on your show, it's like Dave wants to come on my show and talk podcasting. Okay. If Dave comes on my show, is Dave going to inspire my audience? Is Dave going to help transform my audience? And is Dave going to empower my audience? And if Dave doesn't do those things, don't have him on your show. Because Dave just wants to come and sell a funnel or a project or a course or a book, and your guest has no interest in connecting with your audience. Use these inspire, transform, and empower in this example to be the guide for everything that you do in your show. And if you don't have these 3 words, I really have a question for you. How are you planning your episodes? How do you know that you're meeting your targets? You can't just show up on the mic week to week, episode to episode, and just wing it and hope for the best. Having these 3 guiding principles, these 3 words, are going to keep you on task and keep you focused. And I think you really need to put some effort into this for your show. Your audience is going to thank you for it, for sure. So what are the overall benefits of this activity? Well, there's a few. The first benefit of this activity is clarity. By distilling your podcast down into these 3 words, you're going to gain a clear understanding of your core message and the purpose of your show. This clarity is going to help you in maintaining consistency across all of your episodes and everything that you do in your show, including your marketing and, again, how you show up in this world. You're going to get clarity just by simply going through this activity. The next thing you're going to get is focus. These 3 words are going to act as a focal point that are going to guide your content creation and help you stay on track. It's easier to decide what topics to cover and what guests to invite on your show when you have a clear framework. When I used to go running, cross-country running in school, way long time ago, very long time ago, we would run tracks and we would run through the forest. But there was always these markers to tell you where the trail was, because otherwise you just run off into the bush in random directions and you'd never find the finish line. There was a marked out trail that we followed that told us we're on the right path. And that's what these are. These 3 words are just the markers to help you know you're running the right race and you're heading in the right direction. These 3 words are definitely going to give you focus and help you stay on track. The next part is going to be all around brand identity, and it's definitely a benefit of going through this activity. Having a strong, concise description really does help you to establish a memorable and recognizable brand. Listeners can easily understand what your podcast is about and what to expect, which is going to lead them to better, stronger loyalty with you and the brand of your show. Brand identity matters. People want to identify themselves with a brand. That's why we have logos on our shirts and our shoes and all the other things that we wear. It's the type of car we drive, the house we live in, the city, the location, the place we go for vacation, the planes we fly on, the boats we have, the motorcycle we drive. All these things are brand identity. We want to identify ourselves with something that aligns with who we are. And people want to do that with your podcast. They want to align themselves with your show. Make sure you're aligning yourself with a good brand as a podcast, and try to avoid the podcasts that are not a good fit for you and who you are as a person. There's many of them out there. Just want to caution you. When you start promoting a podcast that really doesn't fit your brand, people are going to question you as to what your intent is and why you're promoting a show that really doesn't fit with who you are as a listener. Keep that in mind. The fourth benefit of this activity is all around marketing and promotion, another key component of your podcast. Identifying these 3 keywords for your show is going to make it really easier for you to create targeted and effective marketing messages around your podcast to wherever your community is. It really does simplify your elevator pitch, and it helps you to enhance your ability to attract the right audience. That elevator pitch is real. It happened to me. I've shared it here on the show where I got on an elevator with a bigwig from my company when I was working at this big company. He didn't know who I was. I knew who he was because he was on all the posters and stuff. He was a big shot. But we got on that elevator and the door shut. He looked at me and said, "Hi, who are you? Do you work here? Are you a vendor? Like, who are you?" Because he knew we were going to the same floor. I was able in less than a minute to explain to him who I was, what I did, and what I loved about the company. And then I led him to his meeting right off the elevator. So you are going to have opportunities when you're going to have a very small window to describe what you do. You're not going to be on stage for 45 minutes talking about and trying to explain your podcast to a community. You're going to get time for 3 words. And this exercise is going to help you to be very concise. And this is a great way to practice your content for your podcast. To be concise, have a plan, have a focus. All these things are going to make your episodes better by just doing this exercise and then applying it to every episode and making sure your episodes go through the same filter. That's why it's going to be in the show notes. You can follow this as a plan for every episode. So marketing promotion, you got to know how to attract the right audience, and 3 words is going to help you to do that. Number 5 is all around listener connection. When your podcast's essence is clear, it really does help resonate with your listeners. They know exactly what the value is that they're going to gain when they press play. They know that your podcast is a good use of their time, which can increase their engagement with your show. They're going to listen to the entirety of every episode, which is a good indication to all the apps that your podcast is worth listening to and worth promoting. And that retention level goes up because they're in. They have bought into who you are. They bought into the show, and they're there for you simply because you have given them a clear focus with 3 words to describe your show. And lastly, definitely a benefit of going through this activity is the intentionality that comes with going through this process. As we go through this exercise, it's really going to help ensure that we have every aspect of our podcast, from episode topics, guest selection, and everything we do to align with our core purpose for our show. It does help us to promote with intentionality in your podcast efforts, making each episode meaningful and impactful. So what's the result of all this, Dave? We've gone through this 30 words to 10 words to 3. We've gone through all of the benefits, but what's the result? The result simply is this. By being clear and intentional with your podcast, you create a strong foundation for growth and for success. Your audience will have a clear understanding of what your podcast offers, fostering trust and loyalty. And additionally, It's going to help you to make your content creation process more streamlined and more purpose-driven. Ultimately, this is all leading to a more focused and successful podcast for you, for your guest, for your listener. There's so many benefits to this. Something that I really want you to put into practice on this episode coming up for your next one, for your podcast in general, and then review your 3 words on a regular cadence, monthly, yearly, twice a year, whatever that is for you. Run through this exercise and see how you've changed, or maybe how your podcast has changed. Maybe your audience has changed, and you need to rethink these 3 words. So, what are your 3 words for your podcast? I'd love to hear it. And if I get enough answers, I will definitely share mine as well. So I'm going to hold off on sharing mine here at the end as a teaser because I want to hear from you. So the howtopodcast.ca website, there's a SpeakPipe link. We'd love for you to respond and tell me what tell me the name of your show, who you are, and the 3 words that best describe your show. If I get enough of these, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. If I get enough of these responses, then I'm going to release an episode compiling everyone's answers, and you get to shout out your show, promote your podcast, get new listeners for your podcast from the listeners here from the How to Podcast series, and we get to hear how you would describe your show in 3 words. It's an interesting test, and I'd love for you to try it, and I'd love to hear the results. So go to howtopodcast.ca, hit the SpeakPipe link, leave me a voice message so that I can bring it into the podcast. An email's nice, I appreciate it, but I can't use that in the podcast so we can hear your response. I'd love to hear your voice. And again, you're a podcaster or a soon-to-be podcaster. Your voice is a key part of being a podcaster, and I'd love to hear it. howtopodcast.ca, your name, the name of your show, and the 3 words that best describe your podcast. Thanks for trying this process. Thank you for working through it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and if it was a success for you or not. Let me know over at howtopodcast.ca. Thanks for listening. Talk soon. Hey, thanks for being here on the How to Podcast series. Glad to have you on the show with us, listening in. And hope they're finding value in the podcast. I hope you're finding something that helps you with your show, helps you with the tools and the information from these amazing guest co-hosts through our daily Daves and these solo episodes. The variety of what we're doing here on the podcast is all designed for you so that you can get the tools you need to create your podcast and keep going with your show. That's why we're here. That's why I'm doing this. And I'm glad you're here finding value in this. If you would like to do a little bit more than just be a listener, if you want to do community with podcasters, we have a thing called our meetup on meetup.com. You can come find us, and there'll be a link on our website at howtopodcast.ca, and you can come and join in on our meetup. Instead of just being a listener, you could actually participate and come in and join other podcasters, just like you, at your stage, at your level, where you're at right now. And then other podcasters who are maybe a little further down the road, who can learn from you and you can learn from them. And we host these meetups on a regular basis. Again, go to howtopodcast.ca and you'll find all the information there. We'd love for you to come join us at our next meetup. The only thing we need at our next meetup is you. You're the only thing missing from all of this. So consider joining our meetups. Again, they're totally free on a regular basis, all through howtopodcast.ca. And I'd love to hear more from you about your podcast as well. There's a SpeakPipe link on howtopodcast.ca. Leave a message. I'd love to hear about you and your show and how we can work together to get your message into the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for sharing the show with another podcaster that you're like, hey, I think you'd really like this episode. Go ahead, share the episode, and let's get more podcasters on the mic. Thanks for listening.